Hello everybody, this video is going to be talking about the abstract reasoning section of the UCAT. So this is the fourth section of the UCAT that you'll come across, and it essentially involves getting patterns from different sets of shapes and then being able to answer a question based on these patterns. So you're going to get 50 questions in this section and you're going to basically get 12 minutes. You get 12 sets in this question as well, so it's going to be about 1 minute per set. This does sound quite time intensive, but it does get a little bit easier once you start to recognise the patterns throughout your study. So I got 730 in my abstract reasoning in this exam, which by no means I thought I would be getting at the start, but as my study progressed it did get a lot easier. So initially with my abstract reasoning I absolutely hated it, I'll be totally honest. I think towards the start of my studies I honestly thought it was probably the most stupid section I've ever seen in a test ever. And to be honest, to this day I still think it is. I think it's totally non-reflective of anything to do with what being a doctor's like. They sort of play it behind the guise of doctors will have to do pattern recognition in their job, but then that has nothing to do with looking at like how many right angles are in the triangles in the shape. I'm being quite brutally honest here, but to be honest, this is something I'd quite like to have heard as I was going through my study. I think the abstract reasoning is absolutely ridiculous. I think it shouldn't be in the test. I went through the entire study process of the abstract reasoning, pretty much just showing people the questions and seeing how ridiculous is this. Past your exam date, you're never going to have to know about this again. Maybe some rough sort of pattern recognition you might carry on past the exam, but other than that you're not going to need to know anything. Bitch about it as much as you want throughout the study. If it helps you cope, that's what I did, and to be honest, just learn it for the exam. In terms of tips for this section, there isn't actually too many. You are going to have to do so many of these questions until it starts to click. I was watching videos just like these throughout pretty much the entirety of the study, and I thought that I would be the exception. I thought that I would be the sort of, I did so many questions of these but nothing ever clicked. You're not the exception. They will start to click. They do start to stick over time, so just keep doing it. The main tip, and you will get this from other videos, so this isn't going to be anything special, is note down every single pattern that you see. Even if you get it twice, towards the start of your study, note down every single one you'll see. You'll start to pick up the ones that are common from doing this, you'll start to pick up the ones that are uncommon from doing this, and once you've started to sort of realise which ones are common, which ones are uncommon, what I would do is I would highlight the ones that are uncommon. From sort of having a massive formula list, you will pick up on the ones that you sort of don't really know, the ones that you commonly miss, and from this you can essentially, in the minute in between your sections, you can write down something like this. So you've got a minute between sections, as I mentioned in previous videos, and use this time wisely, don't rest. Write down every single formula. So I'll maybe include my formula list on the screen now. There you go. But I'll go through it here as well. So I've got one more triangle than circle, I've got one more darker circle than a lighter circle, more sort of squares than triangles. This sounds so stupid actually going through this, it's like I'm actually shocked that this is actually in the exam. Odd and even sides, odd and even sort of like total shapes, so for example odd squares, even circles. Same with colours, say sort of like you've got even numbers of filled circles that look like that. You've got odd numbers of like blank circles. Multiples, that's another one. So multiples of 3, for example, multiples of 4. So in the SetA, for example, you could have sort of three shapes, 6 shapes, 9 shapes, 12 shapes, blah 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 blah. In SetB, you could have 4, 8, 12, 16 example shapes. Some of the ones that I didn't really like, and this is an example of me sort of being tripped up by questions throughout my study and being aware of the ones that I wasn't usually able to do. The ones that have max values, so some, for example, SetA would have, each box would have a max sort of value of 6, and then you would have essentially like one circle, you would have one square, you would have one triangle, and you would always have a value of 6, or you would have 6 triangles, or you would have like 3 squares in it. So you would know through practice and through practice. The only real way to do this is through practice. Symmetry. So an actual, if you have a box here, say for example, if you notice that the same things are at the top and the bottom, and the left and the right, you've probably got an axis of symmetry there. Number of intersections. So if you see lines all over the thing, count the number of intersections. The number of intersections could be odd, they could be even, they could be prime numbers, and it's essentially just trying to pick up on the pattern that they're putting there. prime numbers of, for example, numbers of intersections, or it could be prime numbers of right angles. The one below is number of right angles, so you can, if you have sort of random shapes that are just like that, or random lines that are like that, or like, and you have another one that's like that, and count the right angles, potentially that might be it. Equidistance, so if you look in SetA, the triangle and the circle might always be the same distance apart, and in SetB the triangle and the square might always be the same distance apart. In some cases you can also, a shape is always above another shape, so a triangle, for example, could always be over the circle in SetA, whereas in SetB the circle is always over the triangle. And the last one is there's always a shape at the top right. So these ones are quite easy to pick up on, as you'll have a box, and it is quite easy if you sort of take a step back and you look and you always see a circle in the top right hand corner. I am aware that if this is your sort of first video to abstract reasoning and your first encounter with it, it seems absolutely ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous, but you unfortunately just have to jump through this hoop to get into the sort of the medical application process. It is just one of these things where you have to remind yourself about the bigger picture and the destination. The destination here is getting a place in medical school. The journey of jumping through the abstract reasoning hoop is unfortunately just part of the journey. So with the abstract reasoning, if you're in the exam and you're unable to find the pattern at all, give yourself about 20 to 30 seconds, just mentally, you'll get to a stage where you feel like you're taking too long on something. When you feel like you're taking too long in the pattern and you're just not able to get it, that's okay, just move past it. Flag them all and skip them all. Don't spend way too long on a set when you don't need to, because there could be far easier ones later on. It is two important points I would say actually that I didn't really pick up on throughout my study is the UCAT actually include unmarked questions. It's not always, it's not very common, but they can do it. They include unmarked questions. So it's essentially a question that they're testing for future UCAT sitting, and it's either an extremely difficult one or it's one that is, it's mostly one that's extremely difficult. That's as far as I've heard it to be, an extremely difficult pattern that they're testing out if applicants get it, if they're testing out if applicants don't get it. So if you see an extremely, extremely difficult pattern, don't actually fret, because it could potentially be an unmarked one, and just skip it and guess it if you find it too hard. And the last point I would make is, this only applies to people using Medify, but I do sort of imagine most people will be using Medify. Apparently the UCAT abstract reasoning is a lot easier than the Medify abstract reasoning. If you're going through the study and you find the Medify abstract reasonings are impossible, just remember that the UCAT itself is usually a little bit easier. I would say I found this with myself, and most of the people that I spoke to that sat at the UCAT as well said that they found the UCAT abstract reasoning to be a lot easier than the Medify. That's not to disregard Medify. I'd recommend it all the way. I think you're better using a sort of harder studying sort of method and then finding the exam a little bit easier. And yeah, I'd say that's mainly the tips for abstract reasoning. It is unfortunately just one of these things that you have to just learn it by volume. You're going to have to essentially just massively bulk in the questions, just keep doing them. I would say almost, even if you're doing a day that's a verbal reasoning day, stick in sort of 5-10 untimed abstract reasoning questions as well. Just constantly do it. Get your mind in the loop of it as early as you can, and you'll find it easier towards the exam. You will. You're not an exception. Everyone thinks they're the exception, but they're not. You will find it easier as the exam sort of gets a bit closer. I think that's all I've got to say for the abstract reasoning. I think it might actually almost be helpful if I did a sort of work through question with the abstract reasonings where I went through them. I went through my mental processes, and it sort of, you were able to do it along with me. Let me know if you would like to see that, and as always I'll include my notes and all the patterns that I wrote down throughout my study in the description below. And yeah, thanks for watching the abstract reasoning video. Let me know if you want a situational judgment video as well. I'm not too sure if I should do one of them, because to be honest I didn't really study much for the situational judgment. Let me know if you want one of them. If you do, I can do, and also let me know if you'd like to watch a sort of work through abstract reasoning video, because I'm more than happy to do that, and with the other sections as well. I'm more than happy to work through the questions.